I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post something like this on Reddit, but I guess here I am. I just need to get it off my chest and maybe hear what other people think because the whole thing has really stuck with me in a way I didn't expect. So, a little about me first. I'm 34, married to my amazing wife, who's 32. We've been together for 8 years now, and we've got two kids, a daughter who's 6 and a son who's 4. I've been a stay at home dad for about 5 years now, and before that, I worked in tech. Specifically, I did software development for a financial services firm. It was a solid job, good pay, and I managed to invest and save pretty wisely, so we built up a comfortable nest egg. When our daughter was born, my wife and I had a lot of honest talks about how we wanted to handle childcare. She was really hitting her stride in her career. She's a corporate attorney, and frankly, she was making way more than I ever did. After going over everything from finances to what we wanted our day-to-day lives to look like, we made the decision that I'd step back from my job to stay home with the kids full time. It wasn't something we rushed into, and it definitely wasn't based on some outdated idea of what a family is supposed to look like. We both felt it made the most sense for us, and honestly, it's been great. I've gotten to be there for every milestone, every first step, every school drop off and pick up. I built a bond with my kids that I wouldn't trade for anything. My wife, in turn, doesn't have to carry that constant guilt that so many working moms seem to deal with. She knows the kids are with someone who loves them and is fully invested in their lives. We're stable, happy, and this setup works beautifully for our family. Enter my sister-in-law, Emma. She's my wife's younger sister, 29 years old. She just got remarried about 3 months ago. Her husband Marcus is 31. I'd only met Marcus a handful of times before the wedding. He came off as a little smug, maybe a bit too into himself, but nothing over the top. He works in finance and isn't shy about telling everyone that within the first few minutes of meeting them. Not a huge deal, just one of those personalities you kind of mentally file away as not my type. The weekend that set this whole thing off was my father-in-law's 65th birthday. Big family gathering at my in-laws' place. Since Emma and Marcus live about 3 hours away, they were planning to stay the whole weekend. My in-laws asked my wife and me if we could come a day early to help get things ready, which we were happy to do. Then Emma called a few days before the trip and asked if we could watch her two kids. She has an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old from her previous relationship, while she and Marcus made the drive. She said they wanted some alone time during the trip. No problem. Our kids all get along great, and I was already planning some fun activities anyway. I figured it would be a full house of happy, noisy kids, and I was right. By the time Emma and Marcus arrived, I'd been watching all 4 kids for about 6 hours. We had a full day, made homemade pizzas together, got messy with the flour. I was still wearing some of it on my shirt. Built a huge blanket fort in the living room, and the kids had come up with some long, creative game that they were completely immersed in. I was sitting on the floor with them, just fully in dad mode. Marcus walked in, and the first thing I noticed was the look he gave me. It wasn't curiosity or surprise. It was that kind of look people give when they're silently judging you. He sort of scoffed and mumbled something to Emma under his breath. She looked a little uncomfortable, but nothing was said directly to me. I brushed it off and kept playing with the kids. As the evening rolled on, more family members started to arrive. Everyone was in good moods and catching up, laughing, just enjoying the evening. My mother-in-law asked if I could help out in the kitchen. I've always liked cooking, and I guess I'm one of the few in the family who actually volunteers to chop vegetables or stir something on the stove. Most of the other guys were planted in the living room, glued to the TV, watching a game. I was happy to help in the kitchen. Gave me a chance to talk with my wife's aunts and keep things running smoothly. Later that evening, I stepped away to check on the kids again, and as I was heading back through the living room, I heard Marcus talking to my father-in-law and a couple of uncles. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just happened to be walking in that direction when his voice kind of stopped me in my tracks. He was saying something along the lines of how it seemed unnatural for a man to stay home and play house while the wife worked. Then he added something about how his dad always told him that a man who doesn't provide for his family isn't a real man. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Not just because of what he said, but because of the tone. It wasn't even casual or jokey. It was dismissive, like I was some kind of failure or joke to him. I stood just outside the doorway, completely frozen. I didn't know whether I should walk in and confront him or just leave it alone. But then he kept going. He mentioned seeing me earlier with flour all over my shirt, playing dollhouse with the kids, and then helping out in the kitchen with the women. He said he couldn't imagine ever being able to respect himself if he were living off his wife's money like that. What stung the most wasn't even his words, it was the silence that followed. No one immediately pushed back. There was just this awkward pause, like they didn't know what to say or didn't want to get involved. Eventually, my father-in-law said something along the lines of, "Different families make different choices." But it was so weak and non-committal. Didn't really help. Felt more like a way to move the conversation along than actually standing up for me. I must have made some kind of noise or shifted my weight or something, because suddenly they all looked up and saw me standing there. The room went dead silent. Marcus looked me straight in the eye with his smug, unapologetic expression, like he wasn't even slightly embarrassed that I'd overheard all of it. And I just couldn't bring myself to say anything. I turned around, walked out, back to the kitchen, trying to keep my face neutral and act like nothing had happened. Inside, though, I was completely rattled. About 10 minutes after I overheard Marcus's comments, my wife found me. She must have picked up on my mood right away, because she immediately asked what was wrong. I told her exactly what I'd heard, word for word. She was furious. Her whole expression changed, and I could see that she wanted to march right into that room and call Marcus out on the spot. I had to talk her down and remind her that it was her dad's birthday, and the last thing he needed was a family blow-up on his own party. She reluctantly agreed, but it was clear she was absolutely seething beneath the surface. Dinner after that was incredibly uncomfortable. There was this tense, weird energy around the table, and Marcus kept tossing out little jabs, just subtle enough to pass off as jokes, but sharp enough to carry his true intent. He made a couple of remarks about how interesting it must be for my wife to be the breadwinner, and wondered out loud if it was tough for her to carry all the financial weight. My wife, to her credit, kept her responses short and to the point, but I could tell she was holding back. Every time she looked at him, her eyes were shooting daggers. After dinner, everyone moved into the dining room for cake. I slipped away to the kitchen to grab more ice, just trying to take a breath and reset. And that's when Marcus walked in. He looked at me and gave me this smirk, the kind that makes your skin crawl, and made some comment about hoping there were no hard feelings from earlier. He said he was just old-fashioned about some things, like that somehow made it okay. Before I could say anything, he added a comment about how it must be nice to have all that free time while my wife worked, like my entire life was some kind of extended vacation. I was trying to keep my cool, trying to think of a way to respond that wouldn't cause a full-on argument right there in the kitchen, but before I could get a word out, Emma's older kid came running in, tripped and scraped his knee on the tile. He started crying immediately. Instinct just kicked in. I picked him up, comforted him, and helped calm him down. Marcus didn't move. He just stood there and watched. And the look on his face wasn't concern. It was almost disgust, like the very idea of a man being nurturing was somehow beneath him. Then he turned and walked out without saying anything or even checking if the kid was okay. Once the little guy was bandaged up and calm again, I rejoined the rest of the family, and by then, Marcus had been drinking steadily and was noticeably louder. The conversation had turned to careers, and he was in full brag mode, going on about his recent promotion. He started ranting about how men succeed in the workplace because they're not afraid to ask for what they deserve, implying that women, or people who don't follow his idea of a real job, somehow fall short. And that's when my wife finally had enough. I could tell by her tone and body language that she was done staying quiet. She calmly but very clearly let everyone know that the only reason Marcus had that job to brag about was because of me. Now, here's where it gets complicated. A couple of years ago, Marcus was looking to switch firms. Emma had reached out to my wife to ask if I happened to know anyone in the industry. As it turned out, one of my old colleagues was a senior executive at a firm that was hiring. I'd helped that guy out big time in the past, basically saved his professional reputation by fixing a serious coding error he'd made before anyone else found out. He owed me and he knew it. So I called in that favor and got Marcus an interview. Not only that, but I also coached him for hours before the interview, walked him through the kind of technical knowledge they'd expect and helped him prepare answers. He got the job and a decent raise out of it. So when my wife dropped that little truth bomb at the dinner table, you could hear a pin drop. Marcus's face went pale. He tried to recover, mumbling something about how sure I must have made a phone call, but he still got the job based on his own abilities. He was clearly trying to save face. Then my wife added one more piece. She mentioned that I also own a small portion, about 3% of that company through my investment portfolio. So technically, a tiny sliver of his paycheck traces back to me. That part was absolutely true, but not something I had ever thought about or used in any kind of way. I'd invested in the company years ago because I believed in their growth, not because I wanted any influence or leverage. When she said that, it was like watching his entire ego deflate in real time. His face went from red to ghost white and then back to red again. He stood up, muttered something about how we had set him up to look bad in front of everyone, and stormed out. Emma followed him, clearly mortified. After that, the rest of the night was painfully awkward. Some family members seemed to find it kind of entertaining, like it was juicy gossip unfolding in real time. Others looked uncomfortable, probably wishing they were anywhere else. My father-in-law looked especially torn. He seemed both embarrassed and a little unsure of how to respond. I think he wanted to defend Marcus just to keep the peace, but he also knew Marcus had been way out of line. We ended up leaving early the next morning. We didn't wait around for Emma and Marcus to wake up. On the drive home, my wife apologized for how it all went down. She said she just couldn't take him belittling me or our family any longer. I told her I got it, and honestly, I wasn't mad at her. But part of me did wish we could have handled things more quietly, without turning the whole evening into a spectacle. Since then, Emma's been blowing up my wife's phone with texts and calls. Apparently Marcus is feeling humiliated and claims we set him up to look bad. He's also paranoid now, thinking I might use my supposed influence at the company to mess with his job, which is ridiculous. I have zero interest in his career beyond the help I already gave him. Now, the whole situation has turned into this weird family rift. Some relatives have reached out to say they think Marcus was completely out of line and had it coming. Others are hinting that we should apologize for creating drama at a family event. I don't regret our choices one bit. Being a stay-at-home dad has been the most fulfilling role of my life. And my wife and I are true partners, no matter who earns what. But I keep wondering, should I have just let Marcus's comments roll off my back to avoid all this fallout? Or were we right to finally push back and set the record straight? So yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what to do next. Should I reach out to Marcus to smooth things over? Should I apologize to my father-in-law for the scene, even though we didn't start it? Or should I just stand firm and let Marcus come to terms with the fact that he was the one who crossed the line? What would you do? Update 1. Wow, I did not expect this post to blow up the way it did. Thank you all for the overwhelming support and advice. I've read through as many comments as I could, and I appreciate all the perspectives shared. A lot has happened in the last few days, so here's where things stand now. First, my wife and I had a long talk about the situation. We agreed that while we don't regret standing up for ourselves and our family choices, we did feel bad that the confrontation happened during my father-in-law's birthday celebration. So we called my father-in-law to apologize for that aspect of it. He was actually really understanding and told us something interesting. Apparently, after we left, he had a private conversation with Marcus about respecting different family structures. He didn't go into detail, but said Marcus seemed to get the message. That was surprising but reassuring to hear. As for Emma and Marcus, things are still tense. Emma called my wife the day after I posted this, and they had a lengthy and emotional conversation. According to my wife, Emma admitted that Marcus's comments made her uncomfortable too, but she felt caught in the middle. She also revealed something that puts things in a different light. Marcus apparently grew up in a very traditional household where his mother was constantly belittled for not working and contributing financially, while also being expected to do all the housework and childcare. Emma thinks this has shaped his views on gender roles in a really warped way. That doesn't excuse his behavior, but it might help explain it. Emma asked if we would be willing to have dinner with them soon, so Marcus could apologize in person. My wife told her we'd think about it. Marcus himself sent me a text yesterday. It wasn't exactly an apology, more like an attempt to justify his position while also acknowledging he might have been a bit harsh. His exact words were, "I still believe a man should be the primary provider, but I shouldn't have questioned your choices in front of everyone. Thanks again for the job connection." It was a pretty weak olive branch, but at least it's something. I responded politely but briefly, saying I appreciate him reaching out and that I hope we can have a more respectful relationship moving forward. No response yet. On a more personal note, some of the comments on my original post really hit home. Several people pointed out that Marcus's reaction might have been partly driven by insecurity, finding out that his self-made success story had more help than he liked to admit, probably stung his ego. And honestly, while I don't regret standing up for myself, I do wish my wife hadn't brought up the investment thing. Not because it wasn't true, but because it felt a bit like using financial status as a weapon, which is exactly what I didn't like about Marcus's attitude in the first place. The most encouraging thing from all of this has been the outpouring of support from other stay-at-home dads who shared similar experiences. I didn't realize how common it was to face this kind of judgment. One commenter's story about how his relationship with his judgmental brother-in-law eventually improved after the birth of their first child gave me hope that things with Marcus might get better with time. For now, we're taking things day by day. My wife and I are considering accepting Emma's dinner invitation, but we want to make sure it's in a public place to discourage any heated exchanges. And after enough time has passed for emotions to cool down, we'll update again if anything significant happens. Thanks again for all the support and advice. Update 2. Well, the dinner with Emma and Marcus happened last night, and it was eventful to say the least. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a nice but not too fancy restaurant about halfway between our homes. My wife and I arrived first and were already seated when Emma and Marcus showed up. Right away, I could tell Marcus was uncomfortable. He couldn't quite meet my eyes when we shook hands, but he was civil. First 20 minutes or so were filled with awkward small talk about the weather, the restaurant, and other safe topics. Emma was trying really hard to keep the conversation flowing, asking about our kids, sharing stories about her own. Marcus was quieter than I remembered him being at the family gatherings, only speaking when directly addressed. After we ordered our main course, Emma finally addressed the elephant in the room. She said she was glad we could all get together to clear the air and hoped we could move past the misunderstanding at the birthday party. I noticed she used the word misunderstanding rather than acknowledging it was actually Marcus being inappropriate, but I let it slide. Then Marcus cleared his throat and said something that actually surprised me. He admitted that his comments at the party were out of line and disrespectful. He explained that he grew up with very defined ideas about men's and women's roles, and seeing our family dynamic challenged those notions in a way that made him uncomfortable. But instead of examining why he felt that way, he lashed out. It seemed like a genuine apology, and I was just about to accept it when he added, "And I want to clear something up. I did get that job on my own merits. Yes, your connection got me the interview, and I appreciate that. But they hired me because I was the best candidate, and my promotion was entirely based on my performance." I could feel my wife tensing beside me, but I squeezed her hand under the table. I told Marcus I never suggested otherwise and that I was happy my recommendation worked out so well for him. I also mentioned that I was genuinely impressed by how he'd advanced in the company, as my former colleague had actually told me how well Marcus was doing there. This seemed to ease some of the tension, and Marcus visibly relaxed. The conversation shifted to more neutral topics as our food arrived and things were going surprisingly well. Then came the moment that changed everything. Marcus's phone rang and he excused himself to take the call. While he was gone, Emma confided that she was relieved things were going so well because Marcus had been extremely stressed about this dinner, worried that I might somehow use my connection to jeopardize his job. She said he'd even updated his resume just in case. I assured her I would never do something like that, and was actually a bit offended that he would think I would. Emma apologized, saying she knew that, but Marcus was just being cautious since men in your financial position often had ways of influencing things behind the scenes. I was confused by that comment and asked her what she meant by financial position. Emma looked equally confused and said, the trust fund and everything. When I still looked blank, she added, "Marcus told me your wife mentioned you're worth like 8 figures. From some tech startup sale?" At this point, my wife interjected, clearly as confused as I was. "I never said anything like that," she told Emma. "Where did Marcus get that idea?" Emma was starting to look uncomfortable. After the birthday party, Marcus told me, "That's why you brought up the investment thing, to rub it in that you guys are way wealthier than us. He said someone in the family had told him about how you sold your shares in some tech company for millions before becoming a stay-at-home dad." My wife and I exchanged glances. This was completely fabricated. Yes, I did well for myself in tech, made some good investments, but nothing remotely approaching 8 figures. We're comfortable but not wealthy by any stretch, and I certainly never sold shares in a tech startup for millions. Before we could clarify this, Marcus returned to the table. My wife, never one to beat about the bush, immediately asked him who told him about my supposed tech fortune. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, and then something like panic. "I thought that's what you meant at the birthday party," he stammered. "When you mentioned the investments and everything?" My wife shook her head. "I said he owns about 3% of the company you work for through his investment portfolio. That's a few $1,000s worth of stock, not millions. We never said anything about a tech fortune or selling shares of a startup." The look on Marcus's face was almost comical. Then, in a moment of clarity, I understood what had happened. After being embarrassed at the birthday party, Marcus had created his narrative where I wasn't just a stay-at-home dad who happened to help him get a job. but some tech millionaire playing at being domestic. It probably made him feel better about accepting help from me. If I was some wealthy ex-tech guy, then his masculinity wasn't threatened by taking my assistance. I decided to be direct. Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not secretly wealthy. We're comfortable financially because my wife has a great career, and I made some smart investments with my savings from my tech days. But there was no big windfall or trust fund. I chose to be a stay-at-home parent because it made sense for our family, not because I was independently wealthy. Emma looked mortified. But you told me, she started, looking at Marcus. Marcus interrupted her. I must have misunderstood something someone said, he insisted, though it was obvious to everyone at the table that he had invented the whole thing. The remainder of dinner was painfully awkward. Marcus barely spoke. Emma kept trying to smooth things over with forced cheerfulness. My wife and I just wanted it to be over, and when the check came, Marcus insisted on paying, almost aggressively so. I didn't fight him on it. In the parking lot while Emma was using the restroom and my wife was taking a phone call, Marcus pulled me aside. Look, he said, his voice low, I didn't lie to Emma about you. I genuinely thought someone had mentioned you had money. Maybe it was a different conversation I overheard. I just nodded, not wanting to call him out directly, but he must have seen the skepticism in my expression. You know what? He continued, his tone hardening. This whole thing feels like a setup. First at the birthday and now this. Like you're trying to make me look bad in front of everyone. Is this because I said that stuff about you being a stay-at-home dad? Because I apologized for that. I was taken aback by this sudden shift. No one's setting you up, Marcus, I said calmly. There was just a misunderstanding about my financial situation. Before I could respond, Emma and my wife returned, and the conversation ended there. We said our goodbyes, which was stilted and uncomfortable. Emma hugged both my wife and me, whispering, I'm sorry, in my ear. Marcus simply nodded curtly, and they left. On the drive home, my wife and I tried to make sense of what had happened. Why would Marcus make up a story about me being secretly wealthy? Was it just to save face with Emma after the birthday party incident, or was there something more to it? When we got home, my wife had 3 missed calls from Emma. She called her back while I paid the babysitter. Apparently Marcus and Emma had a huge fight on their way home. According to Emma, Marcus was insisting that someone at the birthday party definitely told him about my tech millions. But he couldn't remember who. Emma wasn't buying it and accused him of making it up to impress her or justify his behavior. He eventually admitted he might have exaggerated what he heard because he felt humiliated at the party. Now Emma is furious with him for lying to her. And Marcus is still somehow trying to paint himself as the victim in all this, claiming we deliberately embarrassed him again. Emma told my wife she's thinking about staying with her parents for a few days to get some space and think things through. I feel terrible that this whole situation has blown up to the point where it's causing serious problems in their marriage. At the same time, I can't help but feel like Marcus brought this on himself with his judgmental attitude and then making up stories instead of just owning his mistakes. My wife thinks we should stay out of it, let them work through their issues, but I'm wondering if I should reach out to Marcus directly to clear the air once and for all. Or would that just make things worse? I'll update again if there are any significant developments. Thanks again for all the support and insights from this community. Update 3. I want to start by thanking everyone who's followed this saga and offered advice along the way. Your perspectives have really helped me navigate this mess. There have been some major developments in the past few days that I wanted to share. The day after our disastrous dinner, Emma did indeed go to stay with her parents. My mother-in-law called my wife to give her a heads up and to get our side of the story. Apparently, Emma was pretty upset and had shared the whole situation with her parents, including Marcus's fabricated story about my wealth. The mother-in-law was confused because she knew we were comfortable but certainly not multi-millionaires. After my wife explained everything, my mother-in-law just sighed and said, That poor girl always picks men with fragile egos. Later that same day, to my surprise, I received an email from Marcus. It was lengthy and honestly unexpected. He started by acknowledging that he had lied about the wealth thing. He admitted that after the birthday party he felt humiliated learning that I had helped him get his job, a job he frequently bragged about earning through his own merits and hard work. To save face with Emma, he had invented the story that I was secretly wealthy, which in his mind justified why I would be a stay-at-home dad, and also made the job connection seem less like charity and more like networking among equals. What really floored me was the next part of his email. He confessed that his own father had been laid off when Marcus was in high school and had struggled to find work for nearly 2 years. During that time, his mother became the primary breadwinner, working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, rather than appreciating his mother's efforts. His father became bitter and resentful, constantly putting her down and asserting his authority in other ways to compensate for his perceived failure as a provider. Marcus wrote that watching this dynamic had instilled in him a deep fear of ever being financially dependent on a woman, and seeing our family arrangement triggered those insecurities. He ended the email with what seemed like a genuine apology, saying he was working on addressing these issues and hoped we could eventually move past this. He also mentioned he was looking into therapy to process some of this baggage from his childhood. I was still processing this email when my wife got a call from Emma. She was in tears, saying she and Marcus had had a long talk. Apparently he'd driven to her parents' place to speak with her. She said Marcus had opened up about his father and his fears in a way he never had before. She also told my wife something we hadn't known. Marcus had actually been laid off from his previous job and had been unemployed for 3 months before getting the position at the company I have connections to. That period had been extremely difficult for him emotionally, and he'd made Emma promise never to tell anyone about it, insisting that they say he left his old job for a better opportunity. This context made everything click into place for me. No wonder he was so defensive about his job and so quick to put down my choices to be a stay-at-home parent. He was projecting all his insecurities and fears into our situation. Emma asked if we would be willing to give Marcus another chance, saying she believed he was genuinely remorseful and wanted to make things right. I told her I appreciated his email and was willing to move forward if he was serious about addressing these issues. Now here's where things took an unexpected turn. Yesterday, my former colleague, the one who hired Marcus, called me out of the blue. We catch up every few months, so this wasn't unusual, but what he shared was. Apparently, Marcus had requested a meeting with him the day after our dinner. In this meeting, Marcus came clean about everything, how he'd misrepresented my role in his hiring to his wife and family, how he'd made up stories about my wealth, how he'd been struggling with insecurity about his position at the company. My colleague was impressed by Marcus's honesty and said it seemed like a weight had been lifted from the guy's shoulders. He told me that Marcus was actually quite talented at his job and had earned his promotion on merit. My recommendation had just gotten his foot in the door. He also mentioned that Marcus had asked if there was a way he could acknowledge my help in getting him the interview without it undermining his current standing at the company. My colleague had assured him that networking and recommendations were normal in their industry and nothing to be ashamed of. Last night, Emma invited us over for a barbecue this weekend. She said Marcus was planning to grill, apparently something he takes great pride in, and wanted a chance to start fresh. My wife and I discussed it and decided to accept the invitation. I'm cautiously optimistic about how things are evolving. Sounds like Marcus is doing some serious self-reflection, which couldn't have been easy for him. While I don't think we're going to be best friends overnight, I can appreciate he's making an effort to address his issues and repair the damage he's caused. As for me, this whole experience has made me reflect on my own insecurities too. While I've never regretted becoming a stay-at-home dad, I realized through all your comments that I'm perhaps a bit too quick to justify my choice when it comes up in conversation, always emphasizing the financial logic of our decision rather than simply saying it's what works best for our family. Maybe I've internalized some of society's expectations more than I thought. The barbecue's tomorrow and I'm going into it with an open mind. I'll probably share one final update after that to let you all know how it goes, but I'm hopeful this might be the beginning of a more understanding relationship between all of us. If nothing else, it's been a powerful reminder that the judgments people pass often have more to do with their own baggage than with us. Thank you all again for your support and advice throughout this whole ordeal. It's meant more than you know. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.